Hello, my name is Meera Bhatt, and I'm a junior at Montgomery High School in New Jersey. As I started thinking about what I wanted to major in college and what my career should be, truthfully, I felt very lost. And in talking with family and friends, I realized that so many others were in the same boat as me. So that's when I realized that searching the internet endlessly or other options weren't always the most effective, and talking with someone about their experiences could bring the most clarity to me and other people. So I realized there has to be a better way to do this, and that brings us to this session. I hope this interview sheds some light and brings a real life perspective where you will learn with me as I interview people who are established professionals from a wide range of careers and professions. Through these interviews, we can receive a holistic understanding of a few careers and many different pathways to success. Today, I'm so excited and deeply honored to speak with and learn from Dr. Khyati Joshi. Dr. Joshi is a public intellectual whose social science research and community connections inform policymakers, educators, and everyday people about race, religion, and immigration in the 21st century America. Along with being a professor of education at Fairleigh Dickinson University, she is the author of numerous books and the founder of an organization called Jersey Promise, a policy, education, and advocacy organization serving Asian Americans in communities in New Jersey. Professor Joshi earned her doctorate in social justice education at the University of Massachusetts-Amherst. She's also a graduate of Emory and the Candler School of Theology and pursued postgraduate studies at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Welcome, Dr. Joshi. It's an honor to speak with you.
Thanks, Meera. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So I was hoping you could start with sharing your career journey from your perspective, and hopefully being able to elaborate on, how you got from one place to another, starting from your undergrad.
Well, it's a very convoluted journey. It's not a direct path of, getting my undergraduate degree, getting a graduate degree, and then, having my career. I was a religion major in undergrad, actually religion and biology. Being Indian American, I had to do the science thing, but I really hated it, and I didn't do very well, quite frankly. And I excelled in religion, and I found myself constantly reading. I was very interested in issues of the Holocaust and genocide, and topics along those lines. So then I ended up pursuing a master's at Candler at Emory. I had amazing mentors who are still my mentors today. And that's one thing. I would not be where I am today without mentorship. And that is so important. So, for folks who are watching this, think about that and make sure you find and cultivate mentors and create those relationships. I ended up, because of my one of my mentors encouraging me, I went to Hebrew University of Jerusalem for a year on postgraduate study, and that was phenomenal. Came back, got my degree in social justice education, where I ended up. What's very clear when I look back on my life, I have a few different strands that have been with me. One is issues of anti bias social justice education, and working with teachers and our future teachers. And currently, I work with school districts and private schools and charter schools in New Jersey and actually around the country, on issues of anti-bias social justice education. I've been doing this for 20 years. It's People are more aware of it lately, but many of us have been at it for a really long time. The
Right.
other path in my life, in my academic life, is Asian American studies. Um, I have never been at a university. Well, I take that back. My first job out of graduate school was at Columbia University at the Center for the Study of Ethnicity and Race, where I taught Asian American studies and comparative ethnic studies.
Wow.
And I loved it and continue to love it. And I've always published in that area. So one of my books is that has become very relevant, unfortunately,
Right.
in the last couple of weeks, is Asian Americans in Dixie. And it's
Mhm.
an edited collection on Asian Americans in the South.
Oh,
um,
okay.
and which got renewed focus, or I should say newly focused attention on it, because of the murder of 6 Asian American women on March 16th.
Right.
So that's, those are kind of some of the things that I've been, you know, those are two paths that have been from graduate school till today, and many other things. But in when going for a doctorate in social sciences, there's not always a straightforward path after that. And in my case, it's been about opportunities that have come my way, projects I've been involved with, research projects I've been involved with, and kind of finding your way. And so it does take initiative for sure.
Wow, that's really interesting. Thank you. Um, so you sound like a very busy lady. It's so many roles. So how do you juggle all these roles, and what's the common thread between all of them? Obviously, you mentioned themes of social justice and anti-bias, but as you said, you didn't. It's not very straight. It's not a very straightforward path. So, how do you juggle all your roles, and what is the common underlying thread that has like grounded you, I suppose, through your academic life?
Well, what has grounded me is that, so you had me start with my undergraduate career, but to really understand why I do what I do today, you have to understand that growing up in Atlanta, Georgia in the 80s as a little brown Hindu girl, as I talk about, was not easy.
Hmm.
I was bullied, I was harassed um, incessantly for my name, for the food that I ate, and therefore the way that I smelled. For every summer, my most of my summers were spent in Ahmedabad, and my parents would send us home, and so about every April or May, the jokes would start up about India. Do I have my own pet elephant? Do I live in a hut? All this crap. So for me, my what I am motivated by is to help everyone, whether they are adults or children,
Hmm.
to bring their full authentic selves to school and the workplace. Because when people are able to do that, Mira, then society benefits.
Of
Our
course,
schools
yeah.
benefit, our companies benefit, society benefits. And that's how we need to see it. For far too long, I would keep parts of myself hidden. I was very proud to be Indian. I had an amazing Indian American community in Atlanta. I'd be lost without my friends. And certainly at that time, I would have been lost without my friends. And we've all been talking and realized just what a safety net we were for each other because we all had experiences like that at school.
Right.
And so I'm very much motivated that I don't want any child to go through what I went through. And I don't want anyone to not feel like they don't belong. And so for me, Asian American studies and the social justice education work I do go hand in hand. But that's what motivates me. And that's why I do what I do. And the theme running through my life is, encountering bias and injustice and then doing something about it. And so for me, this is the best thing I could do. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. And because I feel so strongly, um, there are there are days where, especially during the pandemic, where I was doing 5 presentations a day on 5 different topics, and one cannot live like that. I mean, I cannot live the way I've lived the last year. It's not humanly possible to do this, and yet I find myself in that position again because of what happened in Atlanta and not being able to say no. So the balance piece is always difficult when your professional and your personal lives, I think, merge as they do for
Hmm.
many. They certainly do for me. And and I don't, I think in some senses I have that balance because I'm clear in my head of what
Yeah.
I want. I do think I need to um, work on saying no, which I do have a difficult time doing. So.
Well, thank you for that. I think a really important piece of what you said is, everyone being able to live their authentic truth, and how it makes our communities truly prosper. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that, but I think that what you've made of it is truly amazing, and how you're able to help people and educate people with through your experiences is really wonderful. So like you mentioned, as a South Asian, your path is quite unconventional and definitely not the norm. So how were you not allowed, but how did you, pursue religion as a major, and how did you kind of navigate the space of telling your parents or your family that like this is what I want to do and this is why, and show them that you were capable of doing so?
Well, it wasn't allowed. My parents were very disappointed. Um, my dad is like, my best friend. And when I told him I was going to go to Israel, I think for like 2 weeks, he gave me the silent treatment. And my dad's a pretty, he's a quiet, a leader, and but not boisterous or anything like that. Just, you know, whereas some parents might yell when they're angry with you, my dad gives the silent treatment. And boy, let me tell you, I think that's worse. So it was really rough. And the roughest part about it was that I think they were embarrassed
Right.
because of the community and because of what aunties and uncles were saying. Because literally, I was the only person of my age that I grew up with that didn't go to medical school um, or law school. You
Mm-hmm.
know, even some were doing law, and that was even a little unconventional at the time.
Right.
Um, but my mom kind of stuck with me, and she's like, okay, well, whatever you want to do. Dad was disappointed because my dad's a physician and I was supposed to become a physician as well.
Right.
Right. And they ultimately got over it. I know when I got out of grad school and I got my first job at Columbia, they were proud. They didn't quite understand what I did. They
Right.
really just didn't understand what I did, but you know, I was doing something. And so that was good. And I think what was the most amazing thing for me is that in 2010, I was invited to the White House to present my research on Hindu Americans. And I could take one person. And my husband's like, well, it's a no brainer. You're taking dad. Right. And I took my dad. And I mean, ever since I went to grad school, my dad's kind of turned into my PR person, but he really has become my PR person lately and ever since then. So, it took them a while. Of course, I can understand why it was so hard for them. At the time, though, that's why my mentors were so important.
Right.
They were just so important because I would tell them, my parents are disappointed, it's kind of sucks, but so it wasn't easy. It
Mhm.
certainly wasn't easy. And like I said, the hardest part was them being ashamed.
Right. Well, I think that's really helpful, the part about the mentors and how even if you are experiencing pushback in your personal life, having mentors who can guide you not only in your professional life, but also with that personal piece is really, really important. And I think that's a common theme that we see through a lot of professionals and how they say that mentorship and developing those relationships is very, good. So, if you could go through the college admissions and career process all over again, do you think that you would have anything that you would do differently? And I know you had many twists and turns, but what if you could, what would you do differently?
Well, it kind of worked out for me. I wanted to go um I wanted to go to Georgetown. I didn't get in. I got into Boston University, into Emory.
Hmm.
And I actually didn't really want to go to Emory because it was in Atlanta and I really just wanted to get away from home.
Hmm.
But my father and mother kind of were like, look, Emory's a good school. And why go all the way to BU? And so I said, okay, and I lived on campus and I had the complete college experience. And I'm very fortunate because my parents paid for college.
Hmm.
I came out of it totally debt free, and I'm very fortunate because coming out of college and graduate school relatively debt free enabled me to get a leg up on life that
Right.
everybody who has student loans and things like that uh, that it's a different story for them, right? And so I think that's really important to acknowledge. I think that one of the things I would say is that where you go for graduate school is way more important, I think, than where you go for undergrad, number one. I think undergrad, people get caught up in the names of the
Mhm.
universities, and go where you think you can, um, find a place for yourself, and also come out of it relatively debt free if you're not fortunate enough to have college paid for, because honestly, it's just the fees and stuff are ridiculous,
Yeah.
and I would say pour that money into grad school. So that's one thing I would say. But
Okay.
when you're an undergrad, no matter where you are, when I was at Columbia, Meera, one of my students transferred from Middlesex County Community College.
Oh, that's right here.
And she did 2 years in Middlesex County, and then she came to
Wow.
Columbia. And that woman was driven, and I'll never forget her,
Mhm.
and doing stuff like that is smart.
Yeah.
Doing stuff like that is smart. But I would say that, and she sought me out. She sought out a mentor, so no matter where you go, try to connect with professors. Most of us do want to connect with students.
Right.
Some are there only for the research, but most, especially if you go to, uh, that's another benefit for going to a smaller school, is that you'll
Mhm.
have full professors earlier on in your career. If you going to an R1, a research one institution, you often have uh, graduate students as TAs, junior faculty. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. That's how I learned. I was a grad assistant, I was a TA, I did all of that. But at Emory, when I was at Emory, my mentor, who is still a mentor today, who gave a jacket quote for my book. That's how involved
Wow.
he is still in my life. He read my whole book and everything. I met him when I was 19.
Wow.
And he was a full professor teaching a sophomore level class. And
Mhm.
that's what you want when you go for that. You want to be able to see, like, well, what professors, like, do you have senior professors teaching first year and second year students? Because they're the ones who actually have time to give you, not professors who don't have tenure yet. They are a little more under the gun.
Right. Okay.
So, things like that. Now, that's not to say that teaching assistants aren't amazing, and that lecturers and assistant professors aren't amazing, but these are some of the things that folks don't always realize,
Mhm.
that I think is important to know.
Yeah, definitely. I haven't heard a lot of those things, so I'll definitely keep those in mind. And so, like you mentioned, in light of the increased racial tension and violence against Black and Asian communities, what should students like me be thinking about and doing to stay actively involved and also educated?
Know your history. First, start there. We
Hmm.
need Asian American studies, African American studies, ethnic studies in our schools. And
Yep.
we need to push for that now. And students agitating for that and pushing for it and advocating for it it's very critical.
Right.
Very, very critical. Because if you know your own history, then you understand how the history of Indian Americans in this country is linked to Chinese Americans, which is linked to Japanese Americans and Korean Americans, right? Being Asian American is a sociocultural political identity, and there's a reason, and the alliances, we have a lot in common. Yes, there are absolute distinctions, but there's a lot in common, and knowing our place and the way we have been part of this country's history, the good, the bad, the ugly, is very important. And
Right.
then, you know, making sure that we're not only speaking out for our own communities, right? It's justice, not just us. Okay. And far too often, the Indian American community only speaks up when something's happening to Indian Americans. And frankly, I'm sick of it. you know, um, when the Indian American gentleman in Kansas was murdered in March of 2017, I got some text messages from some of my Indian American friends who are immigrants. They're not second generation like me. They came
Hmm.
here as adults. And they were like, Khyati, we need to do something. And I finally got so sick of it. I started texting them all of them back. I'm like, where you been? This has been
Yeah.
happening to the Black community. Where you been? And then they stop texting me. And I'm fine with that because I, as someone who's been doing this work for a while, sometimes I do have patience and sometimes I don't have patience, you know, and I need our community to step it up.
Right. And I
So
think that point about that you mentioned about people just realizing and just coming to the notion when this all this stuff is brought to light is really important, that we need to continuously, educate ourselves and try to be anti-racist and anti whatever to help those communities, because we can't just speak up when our communities are affected. It's we all prosper together. So,
that's right. That's right.
yeah,
And similarly, I do need other communities to realize things that happen to us, right? And to understand what goes on with Indian Americans and South Asian Americans. So it is, yeah, there it's got to be many different ways, if you will. It's not just about both ways, but it's about
of
many
course.
different ways. So I do need that from our allies and friends.
Of course. So to round out our discussion today, I would just appreciate it if you could shed light, given your successful and inspirational journey, advice for teenagers and young adults who are beginning their college and career paths.
It's good to have a sense of what you might be doing. If you don't have a sense of what you might be doing, that's okay too. And if what you think you want to do changes when you get to college, that's fine. One
Hmm.
of the best things that can happen when you do an internship, for example, or take classes, and if you finish that class and say, you know what, I'm not so interested in this, that's process of elimination, right?
Right.
That's not a bad thing. If you do an
Mhm.
internship and say, yeah, I had a good time, but you know what? I don't want to do this. Okay, now you know. Don't
Yes.
see that as a waste of time, you know? And I would say some advice I got that I would pass on is that no matter what you do, give it 150%. No matter how big the job, no matter how small the job,
Right.
you must give it everything, because sometimes you are being judged, you are being critiqued, you are being evaluated um, on something you don't even know. Right. So you got to give it your all, whether it's, if you, my first job in high school was bagging groceries. And, it was important to show up on time every day and bag those groceries
Right.
and take them out to the customer's car, say thank you, and then walk back in and do it all over again for the next 6 hours.
Hmm.
Right. So whether I'm doing that or I'm prepping to go to the White House, you give it 150%.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, it was wonderful speaking with you today. I think that you left us with a lot of good sentiments about, finding mentors and giving everything your 100%, as well as, navigating the space of social justice, racial tensions, and how to help our communities as we see all these issues being brought to light. So thank you so much for meeting with me today, and I hope that all of our viewers found something helpful in today's discussion.
Thanks for having me, Mira.
Of course.